Okay, so next we have Andrew from PiKNiK, who has joined PiKNiK in November 2021. And before working at PiKNiK, Andrew worked at a fintech company in their operations division and at General Electric in their energy investment arm. He enjoys the intersection of finance and technology and also presenting at Filecoin's premier accelerator, ESPA, each quarter. So today he's going to give a talk on modeling FIL returns with investors. So I think that's going to be a very informative talk for some of the people here. Okay, let's go.
Amazing. So hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Stanco. I'm on the finance team here at PiKNiK, one of the storage providers on the network. We also, in addition to storing data, we run an accelerator once a quarter. It's in Vegas. It's called ESPA. It's fantastic. If you ever want to, I can help you teach you to learn blackjack. It's quite expensive for me, but everyone has a good time. So one of the things, I guess, that we're here, it's fantastic. Sylvan, I'm going to borrow from your introduction, right? I actually didn't study. I studied history in school, which makes it very challenging to give a presentation about finance and economics in front of a room of data scientists and people who, by and large, do math without numbers. But that's okay. So, Shilen, you had a great opening question, which is bringing like on-chain data with off-chain data. So that's something that's actually really on my mind, but it comes in the form of answering questions that our accelerator participants often have. It comes basically, or investors, let's say. So a lot of times you initially have a conversation about Filecoin and it naturally trips into finance, right? So the big thing I kind of as I'm breaking from a little bit my title is talking about break-even Filecoin price. Because inevitably, as you do that, you then have to go think about or talk about all of the things that, let's say, around the tokenomics, around understanding how the protocol works, but then also dipping into, let's say, how your business runs. So that's what we're going to talk about. And then just a little plug. So kind of like the most Web3 or the coolest thing about design interest is that here at PiKNiK, we have a graphic designer, but she's really not a graphic designer. She's a mechanical engineer who dropped out of school to come work at PiKNiK. So she makes all those graphics. Her name's Jessie. So she's amazing. Whenever you get slides, we call it Jessifying. So I got to plug her a little bit because she couldn't make it. So, but I guess the best part is that, storage, I guess, like if you're new, history major, you have no idea how to do complex math. You start reading all the white paper. You start trying to read the white paper. You read like Engineering Filecoin's Economy that was like written in 2020. And the best example for that, and the reason why I had her make that graphic, is that you always heard of Filecoin as this island economy exporting storage. I think that's like a pretty useful lead-in because like we're here in Lisbon. Sylvan talks about like this place is like stunningly beautiful. But I guess if you want to look at the history of Portugal, its empire or like the way it aggressively was able to take advantage of globalization, there are lots of like surface level analogies you can make, right? There's lots of like what powered them to go be so successful. Like we'll step away from the historical judgment, right? Triangular sail, the caravel, like there's actual physical technological innovation. And then there's like the old school level, like organizational innovation, right? Risk taking, joint stock company, double entry accounting. That's like the very, very pre-electricity version of accuracy and immutability as you could get. So that's something as the liberal arts major that you're like sitting here talking in a room before we wind up for the math, that was kind of always on my mind. And I think that painting, that's actually Lisbon, right? That's around precisely 450 years ago. So I think we are somewhere up on the right, if I have to imagine. But I don't know if anybody was talking about blockchain back then. So the first big thing, or I guess the thing, Sheila, to your point, and even to what the Starboard guys were talking about, is that any investor, really any SBAR participant that we have in our accelerator, they often ask like, what's the break-even price of Filecoin for like the average, for the average SP, for anything like that. And that is, I'm like, that's a you question. That's like an impossible thing to answer. Like I come from energy. Before that, I spent a lot of time in GE, and you could comp that by, let's say, oil field well. Or you would do that for, let's say, the Gulf states. You would say Qatar had, based on their fiscal budget, a break-even price of $123. Saudi Arabia, with a lower cost of production, much, much lower. So I understand the impetus behind the question, and it's always great, and it comes in a variety of shades, like a variety of flavors. But the thing is, like, we have to help everybody answer that themselves. Because again, in finance, like I'm sitting here, there's so much enthusiasm, like, here in Lisbon, here on the main stage, here at Lab Week before. But the one thing that's always on my mind that I wake up and want to do is, making sure that other SPs are prepared for the long haul, that they have that financial discipline to sort of maximize their runway, to understand the volatility and embrace it, and be prepared for when good times or like when a higher price returns, rather than being disappointed and surprised and left out to dry when it's not. So kind of like I said, there's no single point, but like all of our storage providers are unique, right? And it's by definition, at least in my view, like a very cost-driven exercise. So that takes all of that off-chain data that you have on co-location facilities, on electricity, right? Everything like that, and it sort of marries it together with all of the beautiful data that the Starboard guys, I actually have a slide for them, right? It sort of marries that together in like a very useful analysis. And it's like, this is like the lowest level compared to data science, because I'm just pulling invoices, estimating costs. It is not like a fun exercise, but it's extremely useful, especially as a baby SP or like a new SP on the network, trying to reach that sweet spot of like 1 or 10 PIBs, which is what we would think of as like a pretty robust, pretty self-sufficient there. Having a good idea of your costs, like especially as a startup, can be like fantastically hard. So you just go through your credit card statement. All of a sudden, it's like, who signed up for Monday.com? That is like $500 a month. Where did that come from? Like all of those things creep in, and then doing this exercise just under the guise of break-even Filecoin just helps you get in better financial shape. It also just helps you have a better conversation with your investors, right? With anybody, because it comes in many flavors. Maybe they're talking about, let's say, making an investment in you as the SP, or maybe they're talking about partnering with you, let's say, to like help with let's say they have a co-location facility and they want you to run the node, right? It comes like having this, like being armed with this financial data, very, very useful in talks, instantly credentializes yourself. So kind of there, as you saw, like I did not plan this, Bang, but like this was actually like one of the old questions you get sometimes as like a really nerdy thing, or they did this on an old website called Business Insider, is they'd have all the sell side analysts, so like my old job, come up with your like favorite graph. And I love Starboard because again, for SPs, it takes that on-chain data and makes it so easy and accessible to use when modeling, right? So this is my favorite one because we love FIL Plus, right? We like putting real data. And this is just, active daily deals and watching that just go up and to the right. But the whole point in this break-even analysis, or in any sort of conversations we're going to have, with various stakeholders that touch finance in some way, it's that, it's easy access to this data. Like I don't have to go to Bloomberg. There's no version of Bloomberg, thank goodness. I don't have to spend a boat to a ton of money to get access for this information, right? I can just go here and it's at my fingertips. So it really makes it really empowers you, like as someone in finance or as someone who's adjacent to that discipline. It makes it so much easy. So that was my unvarnished plug that I was planning for the team. So the other thing is that like there's a very simple way to model block rewards, right? You can see that there. But I guess the whole problem is that the future is super hard, right? We all know that reward per TIB is going down, right? If you can just see, I can just take the deal size, take the 24-hour block reward, right? And then there's that part there. That's the part you add value as an analyst, or you add value as a finance professional, right? And you can say how it's going to decrement, right? Is it going to be based on historicals? Can I have the intern here just scrape PhilFox or PhilScout or scrape our Block Explorer and plug that into a spreadsheet, do some sort of regression? I'm like dipping into like the math you all do, right? Can I do it some way that way? But we found that the most useful way to do this actually, even for participants, even for investors, anyone, is just to aggressively haircut it and hold it flat, which feels counterintuitive to like all of the mental firepower in the room, right? Like there's a ton of that. But what it does is it sort of it says that like when you're having a conversation, at least with an external party, that you're sort of aware of the volatility and that you're prepared. And it really sort of creates a very strong downside case for any model that you have. And then all of a sudden, once you do that, then you can start to layer on all of the analytics, all of the other really cool things that all of you are very good at and I'm not good at. And you start to do that then. But like once you establish that really strong or really, really severe downside case, then you get to do the advanced stuff. So yeah, this is a basic P&L, right? This is, I'm not gonna explain the whole thing, but basically what it does is, it does two things. There's how you make money, charge for storage, and how you spend money. And kind of like what I said before, it's that is like going through that right part and then seeing below what I can't control, very frustrating for me, right? But it also informs a level of underwriting. Like that was my old job at GE, was, and the whole idea, what they beat into your head was that, especially on the oil and gas side, so like the evil side, right? It's that you cannot, like, we're price takers in oil, right? I cannot control the when, but I can control if I'm prepared or not for that situation, up and down, right? I'm pretty sure the price of Filecoin can't go negative, but oil did, and that was very surprising as I was leaving my job, back in COVID. So giving that, especially to new SPs, I think mattered a lot. Again, because one of the things that happens is that a lot of this information that we live and breathe can be very intimidating, and giving it in like a very accessible, or at least almost borderline simple format just helps get everyone over the learning curve, and I think just oriented in the right direction towards understanding their business, understanding how to run it, because as you look to expand, as you look to run a node on the network, you'll see, you just see how costs can just spiral, and how in a lack of, I want to say a lack of discipline, it's just easy through inertia to just solve the problem with money, and that becomes very challenging when the market turns. It's easy to sustain something at $20 Filecoin, especially if you're not charging for storage, which you should be, but then when you aren't, and it all of a sudden drops down, things look vastly different, right? So yeah, I guess the big things, like I said, I know this is not like a sexy exercise, going through and doing all that, but it is extremely useful. It was also the way for me personally. I was brand new to PiKNiK, had no idea, right? Felt very intimidated. It was a great way for me to just get to know everyone. That's like Skills Very Finance now, by who spent the money. But it was just a great way to understand the business at like a very, very granular level, right? So sort of like penultimate slide, right? So the thing is, I love the Starboard dashboard, that ROI modeling tool. And what ended up happening, sort of as like a summation to all of this, was that participants kept asking for like a little more granularity, or asking for like something a little different. So I leaned on my old distributed technology that powers the financial services industry, like Excel, and built a model for them. Originally it started out for ESPA participants only. And then I was so worried if I was going to share anything, but there's no real IP here, right? The whole goal around the whole model is just to get everybody oriented around the same page of, this is what your operations look like on a Filecoin level. This is how you generate revenue on a cash and Filecoin level. And this is how you spend money. And then I can give you scenarios. That was the big differentiator for me. I can let you look at, this is what the world looks like right now. I can toggle it for another scenario saying this is what the world looks like, better or worse. And that just became a very easy conversation to have. It became a very good way for us to just build relationships, to just understand the ecosystem better, to teach each other. So I have that model. It is for free. There is no IP. You can DM me and get a copy of it. It is not something. It was something I initially thought oh, this is a secret sauce kind of thing. And I'm that is the total web. That is the wrong way to look at it. This is something that I want to share and have more people do, because it's just a better way of, for me, it's a better, more focused way of looking at your finances. I think I've been here for over a week now, and a lot of people will say, I get up in the morning every day and I'm concerned about blank. And it's usually something about, let's say, getting more data on chain or helping X. It's something ecosystem related. And I finally found my answer. And that was sort of, to your original question, putting those two concepts of on-chain and off-chain data together so that you can make it to the next round, so that you have the best possible shape, financially, to sort of survive or to keep going, right? Because that's something I find that, you'll always see once you get past the first conversation, that's happening. So that was 10 minutes, not bad. So that was about 10 minutes. So that's it. I mean, we could actually also go through the model itself, but that was always the way, again, at GE, that we hazed the analyst by having him go through it. So I can do it, it's no problem. It's pretty simple, but also would love to open it up if you have any questions around what I was talking about. Or if I made any mistakes, we're gonna do that privately. Don't ask the question. Yeah. Did I talk too fast? I got feedback sometime that I natively talk at 1.5 speed. So perfect.
Hello. So my question is regarding, I'd say, the idea that you could basically pool, let's say, incentivize different SPs. So and you could basically pool all this data, some kind of that they're also, you don't get the PIIs, right, and all those things.
So one of the things, so if I understand correctly, and we can keep going, is that it's a really, this whole exercise, I wanted to give everybody the tools to fish, right? If we're gonna stick with bacalao and cod and fish while we're doing our analogies here, because it's so idiosyncratic to have the break-even cost for Filecoin for, let's say, a storage provider in Germany or in the Netherlands versus here in Connecticut. You'll have different power prices, right? Someone knows a data center, like someone's uncle is a data center, owns the co-location facility, so rent is free. So that's a plus. I don't get that, right? So like that, like it's just giving them the tools and having that mindset, especially as you're getting started, that I think is really important, because you're right. Like it's hard to pool or aggregate, because you could, but it really doesn't. Like once you scratch a little bit below the surface, a break-even Filecoin price of, let's say, okay, across this it's X dollars, doesn't really hold water, because you could probably instantly do the math, spend a week or two going through and dialing all that in, and you're going to get a vastly different number. It also kind of works the upstream thing in terms of like also building like as a startup. Like that's the other thing I think of is like the financial discipline, is that doing this analysis is like it rhymes very closely with like FP&A, with like financial planning and analysis, because eventually what's going to happen is somebody on your team is going to ask for a budget because I want to go to I want to go to a different place and go do this. And like that analysis, very, very close to it. Like it's you've built that discipline and those reps doing it. So.
Yeah. Maybe I wasn't specific
Sorry.
enough. So what I basically meant is that you incentivize individual SPs that they share, and then you basically pull this up, right? So instead of going top down, right?
Sure.
Which you said that is problematic because there's too much.
Yeah. You could do that.
Variability, right? To go basically bottom up, right?
That'd be super cool.
And from individual ones, you incentivize them to share the data, which is also anonymous, right? And then you basically can have a high-level overview split by X.
That would be super cool. But that's an area, that's like that would be great. There's now limitations to the way I've chosen to execute against that, because it's all in Excel, right? It's, every problem, hammer and nail problem thing. But yeah, that would be super cool actually to get that data.
It's super cool that you even started with this. Like it's a really nice thing to build on.
That'd be great. Actually, I didn't even think about that. So that's a really cool question. Uh-oh.
Hi, I have a question. It might be a tough one, but I think it's a good perspective for us to know. I think the talk started off with like break-even price for investors.
Sure.
So I'm wondering, like, as you guys like try to raise capital for the network, what are some of the common investor questions that you guys receive that would be good for us to know?
Not a tough question. I would say, so like, let's bifurcate this for like Luna, 3 Arrows, right? Because I think the investor questions and the investor landscape vastly different, right? And I gotta give a shout out because Kevin, our CEO, he's the one who's usually doing a lot of the talking. Amazing at it. I'm usually the one answering all the questions that ZX will ask. So I think one of the problems writ large was that before that, tons of excitement, tons of questions, tons of stuff that's very future focused, very in line with what you'd see on main stage. Everyone's excited about that. Then all of a sudden everything crashes, and then everyone goes quiet. Nobody's actually asking any questions because they all have the model. They've set the price to like $5, and they're like, we make our money getting good deals. We're just gonna wait and see that runway slowly decrease. But now the questions actually what'll happen, they range in terms of, sometimes they go technical. So I see Matt's in the room from tax, right? They go like accounting. I don't know if Phil's not here. They'll go from like the vesting schedule. Let's say, how do we incorporate that? Or they start to go through the assumptions you make on how fast, let's say, block rewards decrement, right? Or your assumptions on what do you do, let's say, after Filecoin is released from a sealing cycle. When it comes, if we're going to reseal, it's going to cost less Filecoin. What do I do with that delta? So they range, and they're usually around the tokenomics or around the revenue portion of it. They're very rarely on the cost side because they kind of know, so. Ooh, final boss. Oh, nice. Sure, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's super cool. Gotcha. Okay, because I was saying I have it at the much lower level, which is you see a downside case and an upside case, and like you hit the different one, you hit F9. So I don't have as many reps on that, but that seems super cool. Sure. Super helpful. Oh, thanks.